So Final Fantasy IX was the last numbered Final Fantasy game released on the PS1. Um, it's my favorite, as I just mentioned, my favorite Final Fantasy game. It is interesting because it's considered the final hurrah of classic Final Fantasy before they moved on to the great Final Fantasy that it is today. But this was them taking everything that they'd created before and like mashing it, almost like Dragon Quest XI. But I would argue it does it better and more tastefully, where it takes handfuls of things from every Final Fantasy and is able to put it in here. And it goes back to more of a classic setting, which I've always been a fan of. I don't like realistic or modern type settings for my Final Fantasies. I prefer it as a fantasy game, which nowadays they really go in weird directions with that, where I don't even know what stories they're trying to tell with modern Final Fantasy games. But back then it was just very much like a black mage, a knight, a rogue, a princess, and vagabonds in between. The story is fine. I generally have problems with Final Fantasy stories. They tend to get way over dramatic, especially in this era. And I don't really understand that. But what I think is special about the story here is that there's a lot of individual stories that are very satisfying and very memorable. Like you have Vivi, he's the black mage, and his story about what life means to him because he's theoretically a puppet. Steiner trying to understand what it is to be a knight and examining concepts about loyalty and what that means. Kind of like even though Steiner's one of my favorite characters, it is kind of a joke character. His story kind of reminds me of Metal Gear Solid 3, which is a really bizarre tie-in. Of just like understanding patriotism, loyalty, that kind of concept, and what your duty is, and what that really means in the end of the day. And I think it's a story that doesn't really get told in Final Fantasy enough. I think it is in a couple of them, like 4, I want to say. But in general, it's a really interesting story. And then the other characters all have their things. There's a couple duds, Quina, every Final Fantasy's got the guy that you don't really care about. Whatever, that's Queen. But there's a lot of cool stuff. And I think the number one thing that makes this one special is the world. It is gorgeous. Even on a PS1. And I'm a sucker for PS1 pre-rendered graphics. But this game takes it to a whole new level. It's so bright. It's colorful. Like if you think of Midgar, whatever the opposite of Midgar would be, that's what like 90% of this game is. It's just this very bright, very cheerful, very friendly storybook setting. And it's, to me, it's like the penultimate Final Fantasy. Now I have not beaten 6. I would love to go back and do that. And I'm sure I will at some point, probably sooner than later. But and I do like 7 a lot, but 9 is definitely my favorite of the group. I'll say that in a much more condensed version when I do the video, which will be after this. But that is a spoiler alert that Final Fantasy 9 is my favorite Final Fantasy.
Metal Gear is the series, by the way.
Solid.
Metal Gear is what? Is the series
That I'd want to get more into.
Hey, that's a good series to get into.
Yeah, there you go. I've been waiting for somebody to pick 2 for the map out, but anyways.
Hold on.
I'm not gonna pick it, but if somebody else wants to pick it, I'm just throwing that out there.
Fuck FF9.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready for that?
Yeah, you got your long game pick, so listen. I am so sad that my save data corrupted on my PlayStation 1, and I never finished Final Fantasy 9 because I really did like what I played of it. Almost like Chrono Cross-esque like, kind of maybe with the exploration or something. And maybe my memory is deceiving me, but I think it's like a perfectly balanced RPG. It's really well paced. The characters, even, I'm kind of like impartial to protagonists having or not having spoken dialogue. I think they handle it well in 9. He seems like kind of like a mischievous rascal. What's his name?
I don't ever know how to pronounce it. It's either Zidane or Zidane. I think are the two ways I've heard it pronounced before.
I like
That's very-
Zidane. He's kind of like your Romeo figure, but like an anthropomorphic one. Kid with the tail. And then Steiner was really cool. I do like him. I don't know how much I remember of VB, but no, it's a really good game.